When a routine traffic stop turns into a career-defining moment, a police officer's worst assumptions crash into a truth he never saw coming. His target is the very man who holds his future in his hands. The sun dipped low over Sacramento, casting streaks of gold and amber across the skyline. Eric Porter was heading home after a long day at the office. His sedan moved with a low hum as he adjusted the AC, trying to ease the tension in his shoulders. The radio played quietly, just enough to dull the city noise. He slowed at a yellow light just as it turned red. That's when flashing blue and red lights lit up behind him, followed by the sharp wail of a siren. Eric glanced in his rearview mirror, eyebrows drawing together. He pulled over and lowered his window as a police cruiser stopped behind him. Out stepped Officer Bradley Larson, mid-30s, buzz cut, his badge catching the last of the sun. He adjusted his belt and walked up to the driver's side with the air of someone used to being in charge. "License and registration," he said, flatly, voice clipped with authority. Eric said nothing, just reached calmly into the glove box and handed over the requested documents. Larson's eyes watched him closely, like he was scanning for something beneath the surface. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Larson asked, leaning closer. "I'm not entirely sure," Eric replied, even-toned. "You didn't come to a full stop at the light," Larson said, though there was a slight hesitation in his voice. Eric frowned faintly. "I see. I thought I slowed down in time. But I understand." Larson didn't respond right away. He lingered, staring at Eric longer than necessary. This wasn't about a traffic violation anymore. Not to him. His posture shifted. The way he held Eric's license was different now, like it had more weight than just a name and an address. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked. Eric hesitated just for a moment. "I moved here a few months ago. The address is on the license." But Larson wasn't listening. His tone sharpened. The stop was taking on a different tone, one that had little to do with traffic laws. "Where were you headed in such a hurry?" "Just going home," Eric replied, voice steady. The shift in the air was almost tangible. Larson no longer saw just a driver. He saw something he didn't like, though he couldn't name it. Eric remained calm, but inside he could feel the pressure building. Still, he gave nothing away. He knew how to hold the line. Larson stepped back, folded the documents slowly, and tucked them into his chest pocket. He stood up straighter, smugness creeping into his face. "Step out of the car for me." Eric's grip on the wheel tightened, but his expression didn't change. "Is there a specific reason for that, officer?" Larson's lips twitched. "I asked you to step out. You don't want to make this harder than it has to be." The threat wasn't explicit, but it was unmistakable. Eric exhaled and opened the door. Larson's eyes scanned him, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored suit with polished shoes. Professional, composed. It should have reassured the officer. Instead, it made him uneasy. "Hands where I can see them." Eric raised his hands, calm. "Is there something specific you're looking for?" "Just routine," Larson said with a faint smirk. "We've had some incidents around here. Can't be too careful." Eric turned slightly to face him. "Incidents involving men in suits, driving sedans? Or is this about something else?" The question struck hard. Larson's confidence faltered. His hand drifted to his belt. Reflex. Defense. "Watch your tone," he said, sharper now. "I'm just asking a question," Eric replied. No defiance, only quiet certainty. Larson leaned in, eyes narrowing. "You seem awfully familiar with how this works. You got something to hide?" Eric let the silence stretch. "No, officer. I just believe in clarity, transparency, especially in situations like this." Larson scoffed, stepping back, circling, slowly. The dynamic had shifted, and not in his favor. Eric wasn't nervous, he wasn't stumbling. He was composed, controlled. That composure rattled the officer more than he cared to admit. "You seem pretty confident," Larson muttered. "Like you know how this ends." Eric tilted his head. "Confidence isn't the issue. Respect is." That struck a nerve. Larson froze, turning to face him again. The smugness was gone, replaced with something harder. "You think you're smarter than me?" he said. "Think you can talk your way out of this?" Eric didn't flinch. "I don't think anything. I believe in fairness, and so far I haven't seen much of it here." "Fairness," Larson echoed, his voice rising. "You think this is about fairness? People like you always—" He stopped, mid-sentence. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Eric didn't react, at least not outwardly, but his stance shifted, just slightly. "People like me?" he said softly, the words heavier than they appeared. Larson stepped back, realizing too late what he'd just exposed. "You know what I mean." But even he didn't believe his own words anymore. "I think I do," Eric replied quietly. His calmness wasn't passive anymore. It was razor-sharp, cutting through the pretense like a blade. "And I think we both know this interaction stopped being about a traffic violation a long time ago." Larson opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. For the first time he looked uncertain, like he wasn't entirely sure how to proceed. The balance of power was shifting, and Larson was on shaky ground. But the moment of reckoning was still to come, and it would be one he'd never forget. Eric's voice broke the heavy silence, steady and unyielding. "Officer, I think it's time you know who I am." Larson's brows knitted, irritation flaring. "I don't care who you are," he snapped, though the faint crack in his voice betrayed him. Eric reached into his pocket, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm reaching for my badge," he said calmly, watching Larson's hand twitch, near his holster. "No need for theatrics. I want you to see it." The air thickened. Larson's eyes tracked Eric's hand as he pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open, revealing a gleaming badge. "Eric Porter," he said, as casually as if introducing himself to a neighbor. "Head of Internal Affairs, Sacramento Division." Larson froze. His eyes flicked from the badge to Eric's face, searching for a sign that this was some kind of joke. But there was no humor in Eric's expression, only quiet authority and a trace of disappointment. "Internal Affairs," Larson echoed, his voice cracking. "Yes," Eric said, cutting him off. "I oversee officer conduct. My job is to ensure that the people wearing this badge uphold the integrity and values it's supposed to represent." Larson's face paled. The confidence drained from him as he took a step back, his hand falling from his belt like it had suddenly become too heavy to hold. Eric stepped forward, closing the gap Larson had instinctively created. "Do you know what the most troubling part of this interaction has been, Officer Larson?" Larson didn't answer. He looked like a man realizing he'd stepped into quicksand, with no way out. "It's not the profiling," Eric continued, "though that's bad enough. It's not the baseless escalation either. It's the fact that you did all of this without even knowing who you were talking to. You assumed I wouldn't know my rights, that I wouldn't understand the laws you're sworn to uphold. And why?" Larson opened his mouth, but again, nothing came. "Because I didn't fit your idea of someone deserving respect," Eric said, finishing the thought for him. His words weren't angry, but they landed like a hammer. "And that's not just a problem for me, officer. That's a problem for everyone you encounter in that uniform." Larson's shoulders sagged. The weight of the moment pressed down on him as he glanced at the badge again, like he hoped it might disappear if he didn't look too closely. Eric stepped back, giving Larson space to breathe, but his voice stayed sharp. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take a step back, return my documents, and think very carefully about what you say next." Larson hesitated, visibly debating whether to push back or comply. Eric's voice lowered. "You're going to hear from me again, Not as a driver you stopped on the side of the road, but as the man who decides whether you're fit to wear that badge. Larson swallowed hard. His face flushed as the full meaning settled over him. Slowly, he reached into his chest pocket and pulled out Eric's license and registration, his hand trembling as he passed them back. Eric took them without a word and slid them into his wallet. He walked to his car, one hand on the door handle, then looked back. "Remember this, Officer Larson," he said. "The badge doesn't make you better than anyone. It makes you accountable to everyone." Eric got into the car and started the engine. Larson stood in the fading light, confidence, shaken, future uncertain. But for Eric, this wasn't over. His next move would ripple through the entire department. The drive home was quiet, but Eric's mind wasn't. The encounter played on repeat in his head, not because it was rare, but because it wasn't. Larson wasn't the first officer he dealt with like this, and Eric knew he wouldn't be the last. This time, though, he had the power to act. The next morning, Eric sat at his desk at the Sacramento Police Department's Internal Affairs Division. Sunlight streamed through the blinds. A file sat open in front of him, Officer Bradley Larson. His record wasn't clean. Minor complaints, vague misunderstandings, and a pattern of excessive stops. Nothing serious enough to raise alarms, until now. Eric leaned back, fingers steepled in thought. Larson wasn't an outlier. He was a symptom, and Eric wasn't interested in bandaging bullet wounds. A knock at the door. Linda, his assistant, stepped in with a stack of reports. "Morning. Mr. Porter, I've got the summary on last month's misconduct cases. Chief Daniels also wanted me to remind you about the department review next week." "Thanks, Linda. Can you schedule a meeting with Chief Daniels this afternoon? There's something I need to discuss." She hesitated, sensing the weight behind his request. "Of course," she said, then slipped out. Eric turned back to Larson's file. But this wasn't about Larson anymore. It was about the system that enabled him. Culture starts at the top, and Eric intended to shake the whole tree. That afternoon, Eric sat across from Chief Daniels in a quiet conference room. Daniels, a seasoned veteran with salt and pepper hair, listened carefully as Eric laid out the traffic stop. "I could have brushed it off," Eric said. "But that would have been a mistake. Larson's behavior isn't isolated. It's systemic." Daniels sighed. "This isn't the first time Larson's name has come up. We've handled it quietly." "That's the problem," Eric replied. "Quiet doesn't fix anything. It hides rot. It's time to be loud." Daniels looked at him, the silence thick. "What are you proposing?" "A department-wide review," Eric said. "Training, protocols, accountability. If we don't set a higher standard, why should the public expect better?" Daniels leaned forward. "You're going to ruffle feathers." "Good," Eric said. "It's about time." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, data, interviews, and public forums. Eric worked day and night, turning the Larson incident into a catalyst. The department was forced to confront its flaws. Larson faced an internal hearing, and Eric didn't hide his role. He sat directly across from Larson, watching as the once confident officer squirmed. The result? Suspension. But the real win wasn't Larson's punishment. It was the momentum to prevent the next Larson. Months later, Eric stood at a podium, at a community event, addressing officers, city officials, and residents. He didn't speak of blame. He spoke of responsibility, of a duty to build a system that worked for everyone. His words weren't just a call for change, they were a promise. "Justice isn't just about catching bad guys," he said, his voice firm. "It's about ensuring those sworn to protect and serve do so with integrity, fairness, and respect. That's the badge I believe in. And that's the badge we're building, together." The applause was thunderous, but Eric didn't soak it in. For him, this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a better one. As he stepped down from the podium, he scanned the crowd. Faces filled with hope, determination, and accountability. Just the way it should be. Some were skeptical, some hopeful, but all were listening. Eric knew change wouldn't come overnight, but it would come. And for now, that was enough. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's start. The conversations that matter, the ones that lead to real change. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Stories that challenge us, inspire us, and remind us of what we're capable of when we stand for what's right.